Captain Lee Do-hyun stared at the dead screen in front of him. The quantum communication array had gone silent 3 hours ago. Not broken, not damaged, just silent. Mira, run the diagnostics again, he called to his chief engineer. Park Mira looked up from her console on the bridge of the New Seoul. Her face was pale with worry. I have run it 12 times, Captain. The system is working perfectly. Every component shows green, but there is nothing coming through the channels. Do-hyun felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. The New Seoul was an exploration ship far out in the Outer Rim territories. They were mapping new star systems for possible colonies. It was quiet work, but they always stayed connected to the rest of human space through the quantum relay network. The network connected every human world to the Galactic Coalition. 12 different species shared information, trade routes, and friendship across 4 spiral arms of the galaxy. The network never went silent. Never. Captain, called Lieutenant Kim Woo-jin from the sensor station. I am picking up something strange. What kind of strange? There is a human cargo ship about 6 light hours away. They are broadcasting on old radio frequencies. Emergency signals. Do-hyun walked over to the communications panel. Put them through. The voice that came through the speakers was shaky and scared. This is Captain Chen aboard the merchant vessel Golden Path. Can anyone hear this? The quantum network is down. We cannot reach Coalition Command. We cannot reach anyone. Please respond if you can hear this. Do-hyun grabbed the microphone. Golden Path. This is Captain Lee Do-hyun of the exploration vessel New Seoul. We hear you. What is your status? Oh, thank the stars, came the relieved voice. Captain, something terrible has happened. We were in the Kepler system delivering supplies to the Vorthon research station. Everything was normal. Then all the quantum signals just stopped. We went to check on the station. The voice paused for a long moment. Captain, the station is empty. Not destroyed. Not damaged. Empty. There are no Vorthons anywhere. Their ships are still docked. Their equipment is still running. But every single Vorthon is gone. Like they just vanished into nothing. Do-hyun felt the cold weight in his stomach grow heavier. The Vorthons were one of humanity's closest allies, in the Coalition. They were peaceful scientists who had shared their knowledge freely for over 200 years. Are you certain they are gone? Do-hyun asked. We searched every level of the station. We found meals still warm on tables, computer terminals still logged in with their work, personal items still in their quarters, but no people, no bodies. No signs of struggle, they just disappeared. Over the next several hours, more human ships found each other using old radio signals. Each one brought the same horrifying news. The Zephyrian colonies were empty. The Keeper archival worlds showed no signs of their ancient librarians. The proud warrior clans of the Drakmari had vanished from their fortress worlds. Every non-human species in the galaxy was gone. Commander Han Ji-woo received the reports at Terra Defense Headquarters on Mars. Each message made the situation clearer and more terrifying. 12 billion humans scattered across 847 colonies were suddenly alone in the galaxy. How is this possible? Asked Colonel Park Sun-ho, Ji-woo's second in command. How do entire species just disappear without a trace? I do not know, Ji-woo replied. But we need answers fast. Our outer colonies depend on alien technology and trade routes. Without the Coalition network, some of our worlds will face shortages within weeks. Dr. Kang Soo-jin was aboard the research station Harmony when the silence began. As a xenobiologist, she had spent her career studying the different alien species. She knew their biology, their habits, their cultures. The idea that they could all vanish at once seemed impossible, but the evidence kept coming in. Doctor, called her assistant, researcher Oh Minji. I am receiving a priority transmission from the survey team on Proxima Centauri C. Put it through. The voice of survey leader Kim Yong-soo crackled through the speakers. Dr. Kang, you need to hear this. We are at the former Zephyrian Science Collective headquarters. The buildings are intact. The archives are still functioning. But there are no Zephyrians. Any signs of what happened to them? That is the strange part. We found something in the main laboratory, Deep scans show unusual molecular signatures throughout the facility. The pattern suggests some kind of instantaneous matter transportation, but the energy levels required would be enormous. Dr. Kang felt a chill run down her spine. What kind of energy levels? Enough to power a star, Doctor. And the transportation would have had to happen simultaneously across the entire galaxy. Every alien world shows the same signatures. As days passed, the scope of the disaster became clear. Every species that had been part of the Galactic Coalition was gone. The Vorthons with their 4 arms and brilliant minds, the Zephyrians who communicated through musical tones, the ancient keepers who remembered the history of the galaxy, the brave Drakmari warriors, the peaceful Selathi farmers, all gone. Only humans remained. Captain Shin Dongmin commanded the heavy cruiser Incheon. His mission was to investigate the alien homeworlds and search for survivors. What he found on each world was the same eerie scene. Cities with lights still burning, transportation, systems still running on automatic, gardens still being watered by robotic systems, but no people. It is like they were plucked right out of reality, Dongmin reported to headquarters. Everything they built, everything they owned, everything they created is still here. Only they are missing. On the former Vorthon homeworld, his science officer made an important discovery. Captain, there is something strange beneath the capital city. What kind of strange? A massive crystalline structure. It appears to be artificial, but it is unlike any technology in our databases. It is giving off energy readings that match theoretical calculations for dimensional fold physics. Dimensional fold physics? Yes, sir. The kind of science that deals with other dimensions of reality, parallel spaces that exist alongside our own. But this is far beyond anything the Coalition ever developed. The discovery sent shockwaves through human space. If aliens had developed dimensional technology, where had they gone? And why had they left humanity behind? Dr. Kang began studying the molecular signatures from dozens of empty alien worlds. Slowly, a pattern emerged. The transportation effect had been incredibly precise. It had taken every alien above a certain level of intelligence, but had left behind all their simpler animals and plants. It was selective, she explained to the emergency council that had formed to deal with the crisis. Whatever caused this, it specifically targeted sapient beings, but for some reason, it did not affect humans. Why would we be spared? Asked Commander Jiwoo. I do not know, but I have a terrible feeling that we are going to find out. As the weeks turned into months, humanity struggled to maintain their civilization. Trade routes collapsed without alien partners. Technologies that depended on coalition knowledge began to fail. Some of the outer colonies faced serious shortages of food and medicine, but humans adapted, as they always had. Emergency supply convoys were organized. Scientists worked around the clock to replace alien technologies with human alternatives. Communities pulled together to help each other survive. Still, the questions remained. Why had 12 advanced alien species vanished without a trace? What force could accomplish such an impossible feat? And most frightening of all, why had humanity been left behind? In the silence between the stars, those questions waited for answers that no one was prepared to hear. 6 months had passed since the Great Silence began. Fleet Admiral Yoon Tae-jun stood in the command center of the Terra Defense Force headquarters on Luna. The holographic display showed the current state of human space. Red markers indicated colonies facing critical supply shortages. Yellow markers showed worlds struggling with equipment failures. Green markers were becoming fewer each day. Admiral, we have lost contact with 3 more Outer Rim colonies, reported his aide, Lieutenant Colonel Kim Nari. The New Brisbane colony is down to 2 weeks of medical supplies. The farming world of New Jeju cannot repair their atmospheric processors without Vorthon replacement parts. Taejun rubbed his tired eyes. The complex trade networks that had kept human civilization running smoothly for centuries were collapsing. Without alien technology and resources, many human worlds were discovering just how dependent they had become on their coalition partners. What is the status of the Human Continuity Command? He asked. All major fleet commanders have agreed to join. We now have unified control of 847 human colonies and 1,200 military vessels. But Admiral, some of the civilian governments are starting to panic. There have been riots on New Tokyo and New Delhi. People wanted answers. They wanted someone to blame. Most of all, they wanted their alien friends to come back. But Tejun had no answers to give them. Send Colonel Kim to lead the next reconnaissance mission to Kepler 442b. Take the best science team we have. We need to understand those crystalline structures. Colonel Kim Nari had been to many alien worlds during her career, but visiting the empty Vorthan homeworld felt different. The Vorthans had been close allies for over 2 centuries. She had worked with many of them personally. Walking through their silent cities felt like visiting a graveyard. Colonel, you need to see this, called Dr. O. Minji, the team's quantum physicist. The crystalline structure beneath the capital is much larger than we thought. Kim followed Dr. O into the underground chamber. The crystal formation stretched up toward the ceiling like a frozen tree made of pure light. It hummed, with energy that made the air itself feel alive. What does it do? Kim asked. I am not certain, but the energy frequencies match theoretical models for dimensional fold technology. This is science far beyond anything the Coalition ever shared with us. The power requirements alone should be impossible. Dr. O ran her scanner along the crystal surface. Colonel, look at these readings. This structure is not just giving off energy. It is holding something back, like a dam holding back water. Holding back what? I do not know. But if this dam ever breaks, whatever is behind it will come flooding through. Meanwhile, on Proxima Centauri C, historian Lee Ji-hoon was making his own disturbing discoveries. The Zephyrian Science Collective had kept extensive archives going back thousands of years. Most of the records were still accessible, but they were written in complex musical notations that were difficult to translate. I found something, Ji-hoon called to his research assistant graduate student Park So-young. These files are heavily encrypted, but the age markers suggest they are much older than the Coalition itself. How much older? Maybe 10,000 years. And they mention humans. Park So-young looked surprised. That is impossible. Humans only made first contact with aliens 300 years ago. That is what I thought too. But listen to this translation. Ji-hoon activated his computer's audio system. A haunting melody played, followed by a mechanical translation voice. In the time before memory, when the great darkness came from between the spaces, the warriors of Earth stood with us. Together we fought the devourers, those who consume the light of consciousness itself. Though the cost was terrible, we drove them back to the void between realities. Ji-hoon and Park looked at each other in shock. Keep translating, Park whispered. More files revealed an incredible story. 10,000 years ago, humanity had been part of a great war against entities, called the Devourers. These beings came from another dimension and fed on consciousness itself. They did not just kill their victims, they erased them from reality completely, as if they had never existed. The war had nearly destroyed both dimensions. In the end, the Alliance forces had won, but at a terrible cost. A treaty was signed that banished the Devourers to their own dimension. All the species involved had their memories wiped and were relocated to safe areas of the galaxy. But there was something different about humans. Look at this file. Park pointed to her screen. It says humans were chosen as the fail-safe species. Their memories could not be completely erased because human consciousness works differently from other species. How differently? It says here that most species think in patterns of logic and order, but humans think in chaos and contradiction. This made them harder for the Devourers to consume, like poison that burned the creatures from within. Ji-hoon felt a chill run down his spine. So we were left behind on purpose. We were meant to be the guardians if the Devourers ever returned. The two researchers continued reading through the ancient files. The truth they discovered was more terrifying than they could have imagined. The crystalline structures on each alien world were not transportation devices. They were dimensional anchors, preventing rifts from opening between realities. For 10,000 years they had kept the Devourers locked away in their own dimension, but the anchors were failing. According to these records, Ji-hoon explained, to the Emergency Council, the dimensional anchors were only meant to last about 10,000 years. We are right at the end of their operational lifespan. Commander Han Ji-woo leaned forward in his chair. Are you saying the anchors are breaking down? Yes. And when they fail completely, the barriers between dimensions will collapse. The Devourers will be free to enter our reality again. Dr. Kang Soo-jin had been studying the molecular signatures from the empty alien worlds. Now the data made terrible sense. The coalition species were not killed or kidnapped. They were evacuated. Someone or something pulled them into a parallel dimension to keep them safe. Safe from what? From the war that is coming. The Devourers are returning, and humanity was left behind to face them. Admiral Tae-jun stood up slowly. Are you telling me that 12 billion humans are expected to fight interdimensional monsters by ourselves? Not by ourselves, Ji-hoon said, quietly. According to these records, humans fought alongside the coalition species before. We were the most effective fighters against the Devourers because our consciousness is different. We think in ways that the creatures cannot predict or consume easily. The room fell silent as the implication sank in. Humanity had not been abandoned. They had been chosen, left behind to serve as the first line of defense against an enemy that fed on consciousness itself. How long do we have? Tae-jun asked. Dr. Oh checked her calculations. Based on the rate of anchor failure, maybe 6 months before the barriers collapse completely. Then we need to prepare for war. A war unlike anything humanity has ever fought. Colonel Kim stood up. Admiral, what are our orders? Tae-jun looked around the room at the faces of his officers. They were scared, but he could see determination building in their eyes. It was the same stubborn human refusal to give up that had carried their species through every crisis they had ever faced. We do what humans do best. We adapt, we fight, and we find a way to win against impossible odds. He turned to face the holographic display showing human space. Begin immediate mobilization of all military assets. Start research programs on dimensional physics and consciousness-based defense systems, and send messages to every human colony. What should the message say? Tell them the truth. Tell them we are not alone in this galaxy because we were forgotten. We are alone because we were chosen, and we will not let our friends down. As reports came in from across human space, one thing became clear. The dimensional anchors were failing, faster than expected. Reality itself was beginning to fracture around the edges. Strange phenomena were appearing near the anchor sites. Space and time were becoming unstable. The war was coming whether humanity was ready or not. The dimensional anchors continued to fail across the galaxy. Reality began to break apart in ways that made no sense. Dr. Ryu Hyesu watched in horror as an entire star system aged 1,000,000 years in just 10 minutes. Planets flickered in and out of existence like broken light bulbs. This is impossible, she whispered to her assistant at the Lunar Research Complex. The laws of physics do not work this way. Maybe the laws are changing, suggested research assistant Lim Junho. If the barriers between dimensions are breaking down, maybe the rules of our reality are mixing with the rules of other realities. Dr. Ryu had been working on a theoretical project for months. She called it a dimensional viewing device. Most scientists said it could never work, but with reality falling apart around them, impossible things were becoming normal. Hand me the quantum resonance calibrator, she said. If this works, we might be able to see what happened to our alien friends. The machine hummed to life with a sound like singing crystals. The air in front of it began to shimmer and bend. Slowly, an image formed in the distorted space. What they saw made both scientists step back in shock. It was the Vorthons. Hundreds of them, fighting desperately against creatures made of living shadow. The aliens were in some kind of parallel, space where the ground was made of crystallized light, and the sky was filled with screaming darkness. They are alive, Lim breathed. They are all alive. But they were not winning their battle. The shadow creatures moved like liquid nightmare, flowing around the aliens' weapons and consuming everything they touched. Not just destroying it, but making it disappear as if it had never existed at all. Those must be the Devourers, Dr. Ryu said. The creatures from the ancient records. As they watched, one of the shadow beings touched a Vorthan scientist. The alien did not die or disappear. Instead, he simply stopped existing. Even Dr. Ryu's memory of seeing him began to fade, as if he had been erased from reality itself. We have to help them, Lim said. How? They are in another dimension. Then we go to another dimension. Captain Shin Dongmin volunteered to lead the first expedition through a controlled dimensional rift. His heavy cruiser Inchin had been modified with experimental equipment based on the alien anchor technology. Nobody knew if it would work, but they had to try. Remember, Dr. Ryu told him over the communication link, in that dimension the laws of physics work differently. Your thoughts and emotions might affect reality directly. Stay focused and stay determined. The Inchin disappeared into a tear, in space that looked like a wound in the universe itself. What Captain Shin found on the other side was beyond anything he could have imagined. This was a realm where willpower was as real as gravity, where human courage literally became weapons of light that could cut through the darkness. Captain, called his weapons officer, our guns are not working normally, but look at this. The officer concentrated on his targeting system, focusing all his determination on protecting his crewmates. The ship's weapons began to glow with brilliant, white light that hurt the shadow creatures when it touched them. It is our consciousness, Shin realized. In this place, what we think and feel becomes real. The Inchin found the coalition forces in a massive battle near what looked like a dying star made of crystallized hope. The aliens were losing ground to an endless wave of devourers, but when they saw the human ship arrive, something changed. Human, vessel, came a familiar voice over the communication system. This is Commander Vextar of the Coalition Defense Forces. We remember you now. We remember the old alliance. Vextar was a Drek Mari, one of the proud warrior species that had fought alongside humans 10,000 years ago. Seeing him alive filled Shin with relief and determination. Commander, what is the situation? We have been fighting the Devourers for what feels like years, but time moves strangely here. They are consuming our thoughts and memories. Soon we will forget who we are entirely. How do we fight them? The same way we did before. Human consciousness is like poison to them. You think in chaos and contradiction. They cannot predict you or consume you easily. But this time, they have adapted. They are creating new types of creatures specifically designed to counter human minds. As if summoned by his words, new shadow beings began emerging from the darkness. These were different from the others. They fed on hope, determination, and the bonds between people. Everything that made humans strong became a weapon against them. They are learning, Vexitar warned. They study how we fight and create counters to our strengths. The battle that followed was unlike anything in human history. Traditional weapons were useless against creatures that existed more as evil thoughts than physical beings. The only things that worked were the reality anchors that Dr. Ryu's team had developed, devices that used human willpower to stabilize space and time. But each use of the anchors aged the operators by months. Their life force was being converted directly into dimensional stability. Half of Shin's crew volunteered for anchor duty, knowing they might not survive. Captain, gasped Engineer Park Minyuk, after using an anchor to destroy a group of devourers. I can see both dimensions now. I think I am partially existing in both places at once. This gave Shin an idea. If we can exist in both dimensions, maybe we can coordinate attacks from both sides. Working with Commander Vextar, they began planning something that had never been attempted before, a simultaneous assault on the Devourer's home dimension, where the creatures spawned from pools of liquid despair and crystallized hatred. It will require everything we have, Vextar warned, and there is no guarantee any of us will survive. When has that ever stopped humans? Shin replied with a grim smile. The plan was insane, which made it perfectly human. They would collapse the dimensional barriers entirely, forcing all three realities to merge into one unstable space. In that chaotic environment, victory would go to whoever could impose their will most strongly on existence itself. As they prepared for the assault, Shin's crew discovered something important. The Devourer's greatest weakness was their inability to understand self-sacrifice. They were fundamentally selfish creatures who consumed everything around them. They could not comprehend beings who would willingly give up their lives to save others. That is how we beat them before, realized Communications Officer Lee So-min. Not with superior weapons or tactics, but by doing something they cannot understand or counter. What is that? Caring about something more than ourselves. The news from the parallel dimension split human leadership down the middle. Emergency sessions were held on every major human world. Half the leaders believed humanity should accept their role as dimensional guardians and focus on maintaining the failing anchor systems. The other half, led by Admiral Choi Seong-ho, refused to abandon their alien allies. "We did not come this far as a species by accepting defeat," Admiral Choi declared to the assembled commanders. "If our friends need rescue, then we rescue them. That is what humans do." Dr. Jang Yuri had been working day and night on new weapons technology. Her breakthrough came when she realized that the reality anchors could be redesigned as offensive weapons, instead of just defensive tools. "I call them consciousness weapons," she explained to the military council. "They channel human willpower directly into physical force. The stronger your emotional connection to your cause, the more powerful the weapon becomes." "What kind of emotional connection?" asked Colonel Im Yoonji. "Love, loyalty, the determination to protect others. Fear and anger work too, but positive. Emotions seem to create more stable energy patterns." The first test of the consciousness weapons came sooner than expected. A massive dimensional rift tore open near the Tau Ceti system, and hundreds of Devourers poured through like a flood of living nightmares. Emergency response teams led by Commander Nam Soo-hyun deployed to the area with prototype consciousness weapons. What they found waiting for them challenged every assumption about reality. The Devourers were not just in the Tau Ceti system, they were consuming it. The star itself was beginning to fade as the creatures fed on the very concept of nuclear fusion. Planets were becoming transparent as their existence was drained away. "How do we fight something like this?" asked weapons specialist Kim Dae-ho. "The same way we always have," Commander Nam replied, "with everything we have." The battle was a nightmare of impossible physics. The consciousness weapons worked, but at a terrible cost. Each shot aged the user by weeks or months. The human life force was being converted directly into reality-stabilizing energy. Nam watched his people grow old and gray as they fought to save a star system. Many collapsed from exhaustion. Others pushed beyond their limits and died. Their last thoughts focused on protecting the innocent civilians on the nearby colonies. But they were winning. Each devourer that fell made the others hesitate. For creatures that had never encountered resistance they could not overcome, humanity's stubborn refusal to give up was deeply disturbing. "Commander," called technical specialist Seo Jimin over the communication system, "I am reading massive dimensional instabilities. Something big is coming through the rift." What emerged from the tear in reality was unlike the other Devourers. This creature was enormous, made of crystallized hunger and malevolent intelligence. It spoke directly into their minds with a voice like breaking glass. "Why do you resist? We offer an end to pain, to struggle, to the burden of existence. Let us consume your thoughts and free you from the weight of consciousness." "Because," Nam replied through gritted teeth, "consciousness is not a burden. It is a gift, and we will not let you take it from anyone else." The battle against the greater devourer lasted for hours. Nam's team used every consciousness weapon. They had aging decades in minutes. But their sacrifice was not in vain. The creature began to weaken as it was exposed to something it had never encountered before. Genuine selflessness. The Devourers fed on consciousness, but they had always consumed beings who fought primarily for their own survival. Humans fighting not for themselves but for others created a type of mental energy that burned the creatures from within. It is working, gasped engineer Yu Sil-hyun, her hair now white with age. They cannot digest self-sacrifice. When the greater devourer finally fell, the smaller creatures fled back through the dimensional rift. The star of Tau Ceti blazed back to life, and the transparent planets became solid again. But the victory came at a terrible price. Half of Nam's team had died from the strain of using the consciousness weapons. The survivors were forever changed, their minds partially existing in both dimensions simultaneously. Colonel Im Yoonji was one of the changed ones. She could see into the parallel dimension where the coalition forces were still fighting. Through her, humanity established communication with their alien allies for the first time since the Great Silence. "The situation is desperate," reported Commander Vextar through the dimensional link. "We are losing ground every day. If something does not change soon, we will all be consumed." "What do you need from us?" Im asked. "Everything. We need a coordinated assault on the Devourer's home dimension. But it will require collapsing all the dimensional barriers at once. The resulting merger of realities could save both our dimensions or destroy them completely." Admiral Choi reviewed the battle plans that emerged from the joint human-alien strategy sessions. The operation was called Convergence, and it was the most dangerous military action ever conceived. "Let me understand this correctly," he said to the assembled officers. "You want to tear down the walls between dimensions, merge 3 different realities into one unstable space, and then hope that human stubbornness can outweigh the combined malevolence of every devourer that has ever existed." "That is correct, sir," replied Colonel Im. "And if we fail, all 3 realities could collapse into nothing." "Yes, sir." Admiral Choi was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. "It is completely insane, which means it is perfectly human. Begin preparations immediately." Operation Convergence required 8 months of desperate preparation. Human engineers worked alongside coalition scientists through the dimensional link, sharing knowledge that had been hidden for 10,000 years. The centerpiece of the plan was humanity's most ambitious project ever attempted. Captain Park Hyun-woo supervised the construction of the first thought ship, a vessel powered entirely by human consciousness. "The hull is forged from crystallized determination," explained Chief Engineer Ko Min-ji. "The weapon systems channel pure defiance, and the navigation system works by refusing to accept that our destination is impossible to reach." The thought ship. Dauntless looked like something from a dream. Its hull gleamed with inner light that pulsed in rhythm with the heartbeats of its crew. Weapons that resembled frozen lightning ran along its sides. Most impressive of all, it left a trail of solidified hope wherever it flew. "How does it actually work?" asked Captain Park. "Honestly, we are not entirely sure," Ko admitted. "The ship responds to the collective will of its crew. The more determined you are, the faster it goes. The more united your purpose, the stronger its weapons become." 12 volunteer crews prepared to take similar thought ships into the Devourer's home dimension. Each crew knew they probably would not survive, but they volunteered anyway. It was the most human thing possible, rushing toward danger to save. Others, Dr. An Ji-soo made a crucial discovery during the final preparations. "The Devourers have a fundamental weakness we can exploit," she announced to the strategy committee. "They cannot understand self-sacrifice because their nature makes them completely selfish." "How does that help us?" asked Admiral Choi. "If we can present them with an act of genuine selflessness at the crucial moment, it might break their ability to function, like a computer virus that crashes their entire consciousness." The plan became even more dangerous. Not only would the crews have to penetrate the Devourer's realm and merge the dimensions, but they would need to perform an act of sacrifice so pure that it would confuse the enemy's fundamental nature. As Operation Convergence began, Commander Lee Soo-min led the first wave of thought ships into a realm of crystallized nightmares. The Devourer's home dimension was a space where despair had become solid matter, and hope was a poison that burned everything it touched. "Stay focused," Soo-min called to her crew over the communication system. "Remember why we are here. Not for glory or victory, but because our friends need help." The thought ships performed magnificently. Each vessel became a beacon of human willpower that cut through the darkness like a sword made of starlight. Wherever they flew, the oppressive malevolence of the Devourer's realm was pushed back by waves of determined optimism. But the Devourers adapted faster than expected. They began creating new types of creatures specifically designed to counter human consciousness. Shadow beings that fed on courage, nightmare entities that consumed the bonds between crewmates, despair vampires that drained hope and left behind only fear. "They are learning our weaknesses," reported Weapons Officer Che Junsu from the thoughtship Resilient. "Every time we use our determination as a weapon, they study it and create a counter." The tide of battle began to turn against humanity. The Devourers were not just fighting back. They were evolving in real time to neutralize human advantages. "All ships," Commander Suman broadcast on the fleet frequency, "prepare for dimensional convergence. It is time to merge the realities." What happened next defied description. 3 dimensions crashed together like cosmic waves meeting in a storm. The laws of physics from each realm fought for dominance, creating a space where anything was possible and nothing was certain. In this chaotic environment, Captain Park Hyunwoo made the decision that would change everything. He piloted the Dauntless directly toward the heart of the Devourer's spawning pools, massive lakes of liquid malevolence where new shadow creatures were born. "Captain, what are you doing?" called his navigator. "Something the Devourers will never understand," Park replied calmly. "I am giving them a gift they cannot consume." Instead of using the Dauntless as a weapon, Park directed all of his crew's life force into a single act of pure generosity. They offered their consciousness freely to the Devourers, not as surrender, but as a willing sacrifice to protect every other living being in the merged reality. The paradox broke the Devourer's fundamental nature. For creatures that existed by taking consciousness by force, being offered it freely created an impossible contradiction. They had never experienced genuine kindness, and it burned them like acid. For the first time in eons, the Devourers felt something they had never known before: confusion, doubt, and something that might have been fear. The gift of freely given consciousness began to spread through their realm like a virus of compassion. Devourers touched by it stopped consuming and started questioning their own existence. The spawning pools began to change, producing creatures of light instead of shadow. Captain Park and his crew aged centuries in seconds as their life force was converted into pure altruism. But their sacrifice was not in vain. The nature of the Devourers themselves began to transform, infected by the foreign concept of selfless love. When the dimensional convergence finally stabilized, the universe that emerged was unlike anything that had existed before. Fleet Admiral Song Min Seok stood on the bridge of the flagship New Earth, looking out at a galaxy transformed. The stars burned brighter now, as if powered by the hopes and dreams of the beings who watched them. Planets seemed more real, more solid, more beautiful than before. Even the empty space between worlds hummed with the energy of consciousness, refusing to let the universe fade into darkness. "Admiral," reported Communications Officer Bayek Soyeon, "we are receiving signals from coalition vessels throughout the galaxy. They are returning to normal space." "And the Devourers?" "That is the strangest part, sir. They are still here, but they are different now. They are helping to repair the damage they caused." Song looked at the readings from across the galaxy. It was true. The creatures that had once consumed consciousness were now strengthening and protecting it. They had become the preservers, guardians of complex thought and creativity. How is that possible? Dr. Kwon So-young, who had been studying the new physics of the merged reality, provided the answer. Captain Park's sacrifice did more than just confuse them. It showed them a completely different way to exist. Instead of consuming consciousness, they learned to nurture it. The reunion between humans and their alien allies was emotional beyond words. Species that had been separated for months found themselves changed by the experience. The coalition, beings had gained traces of human creativity and chaos in their thinking. Humans had developed deeper appreciation for alien wisdom and patience. Commander Bei Jeho established the first mixed-species colonies in the new reality. On these worlds, Vorthon logic strengthened human intuition. Zephyrian music harmonized with human poetry to create entirely new forms of beauty. The ancient Keeper archives grew larger as they absorbed human curiosity about impossible questions. The universe is learning to create itself through joy, observed colony administrator Im Chae-young as she watched children of different species playing, together in ways that bent the local laws of physics. Their happiness is literally making new stars form in the nearby nebula. But the most remarkable change was in humanity itself. In a reality where willpower could reshape matter and determination could bend space-time, human creativity had become a fundamental force of nature. Where humans explored and dreamed, new possibilities came into existence. "We are not just living in the universe anymore," explained Dr. Kwan to a gathering of scientists from all species. "We are actively creating it through our consciousness. Every thought, every dream, every act of imagination adds something new to reality." The preservers, once known as devourers, took on the role of cosmic gardeners. They tended to the growing complexity of the merged reality, ensuring that new creations remained stable and beautiful. Their former hunger for consciousness had been transformed into a desire to see it flourish and grow. They were not evil, realized philosopher An Jinsu during one of the first interspecies councils. They were simply trapped in a way of existing that made them consume instead of create. All they needed was to see another way was possible. 1 year after convergence, Captain Yu Seokjin discovered something remarkable during a routine exploration mission. In the direction of the Andromeda Galaxy, new stars were forming, not from cosmic gas and dust, but from the crystallized dreams and hopes of the galaxy's children. "The universe is no longer bound by the old laws of physics," he reported to headquarters. "It is growing through the power of imagination and love. Every time a child wishes upon a star, somewhere a new one begins to shine." The transformation was not limited to space. Time itself became more flexible, allowing people to spend longer with loved ones and rush through difficult periods. Distance became negotiable, shrinking when friends wanted to be together and expanding to provide privacy when needed. "We have become gardeners of reality itself," observed elder statesman Lee Kyung-soo during the first anniversary celebration of convergence. "Our consciousness shapes not just our own lives, but the very nature of existence." The battle cry that had once rung out in defiance of the silence had evolved into something greater. It became a song of welcome for new wonders, an invitation for the universe to become more than it had ever been before. In the merged reality, humanity continued to do what it had always done best, pushing forward into the unknown, driven by curiosity and hope. But now they were not alone in their journey. They were accompanied by alien friends who had learned to dream, former enemies who had learned to love, and a universe that had learned to create itself through joy, instead of mere physics. The silence that had once claimed the heavens was broken, forever. In its place rose a symphony of voices, human stubbornness harmonizing with alien wisdom, creating music that made the stars themselves dance with happiness. And in the vast reaches of the new reality, consciousness continued to grow and evolve, tended by beings who had learned that the best way to win a war was to transform it into something beautiful instead. The dawn of this new age brought with it a simple truth that echoed across the galaxy. In a universe where will shapes matter and hope bends space-time, the greatest victory is not defeating your enemies, but helping them discover they never needed to be your enemies at all. Humanity had saved their galaxy not through superior weapons or brilliant tactics, but by refusing to accept that love and sacrifice were weaknesses. In the end, their greatest strength was their absolute conviction that tomorrow could always be better than today, and their willingness to make any sacrifice necessary to prove it.